Welcome to the Spare Parts Podcast with FTC Team 535 Tobor. This is episode 1, Cascade Party.
Welcome to 535 Tobor's podcast Spare Parts. Today we're going to be going over the game manual, giving you our thoughts about this year's game, and trying to decide what we think the best approach should be and what you need to be looking for in this year's game. Alright, now we will introduce ourselves. I'm Rand Burnett. I work a lot on the 3D modeling. I've spent most of my time with that.
I'm Ben. I have worked on a lot of things, including 3D modeling, but this year I'm going to focus as much as possible on the programming.
I'm Steven. I have a lot of experience with programming, so that's what I'll continue to do this year.
I'm Mitchell. I work mostly with the mechanical side, also a little bit with wiring, and I have experience with 3D modeling.
I'm David Link, and I work primarily with the hardware installation on our robots, such as sensors and motor controllers.
I'm Tony. I do a bit of the programming for our robot.
So we're the 6 members of Team Tobor, FTC Team 535 in Crawfordsville, Indiana, and we're really excited about doing a podcast over the course of this year and hopefully over years to come as well. So this year, today, we're going to be discussing a little bit about what we think the game, what important aspects of the game are going to be. So, Rand, what are your ideas?
Well, I think this year in Cascade Party, or Rescue as they're calling it, yes, there are a lot of similarities. Obviously, the debris, the wiffle balls and blocks from the past 2 games. But, I mean, if you think about it, there aren't too many pieces to this year's, field. There's 2 ramps, which are identical, just flip-flopped on the 2 sides, and the 2 buttons. Besides that, there aren't really any other game pieces. So what that does mean is that teams are going to be focusing a lot this year on those ramps, because that's where everything's going to happen. They're going to be scoring on there. You're going to have to release the people who fall. You can get points just from driving up onto those, or what were they called?
Mountains.
Well, no, I mean the bars.
Churros.
Just from driving up on the churros, you're going to get points. So one thing, it's kind of interesting to see this year how there's really just one big element, but there's still a lot of flexibility you can get out of that. Yeah. What do you think, Ben?
I really like this year's game a lot because there's a lot of flexibility. You can take a lot of different angles. And I think one of the important things about this year is that teams are not going to be able to do every single thing, particularly at early competitions. So there has to be, and obviously a lot of teams, I see people making motions that we are going to try to do something, which we are, and a lot of teams are going to try to do everything, but I think it's unrealistic to expect most teams to be able to do every single bit of the game at their first competition. So it's going to be interesting to see how teams strategize in terms of which things they choose to do, whether they're going to be scoring, hanging, working on climbing up the mountain, scoring the climbers. And that's one of the reasons I really like this year's game. And also, again, we have the repeated scoring elements from Block Party and Cascade effects, which are not great, but have their advantages and disadvantages.
Might as well recycle.
That's true.
Yeah, so I really like the idea of this year's game, but the main problem I have is right after this platform switch, we go from this kind of simpler programming language with these electronics to a brand new one, and to this advanced game with the climbing, and so it would make more sense to, if we used last year's game for this year's game as an introductory game into what the new electronics can do. But it's also that challenge that FTC is trying to push out so that they can help build the experience levels of the teams.
Yeah, and there are a lot of different things that teams can do to build up their experience with different types of building and programming.
Side note, on this podcast, Tobor Spare Parts, we will be doing a later one about the programming language itself to hopefully help out some of you young teams struggling with this new language.
Yes, we will.
Besides the language switch and the whole controlling switch, I feel like this game is definitely the hardest of the 4 that I've been a part of. And I mean, the 30-degree mountain is definitely going to be a challenge. I also feel like autonomous is going to have to be really good
Well,
to
because
work.
it's inversed, it's not just a copy of the autonomous. You've actually got to have,
Yeah, you have to be
In
able
those
to
programs.
switch your you have to read a conditional and to figure out what program you need to run in order to complete the game the way it needs to
And
be.
we'll talk a little bit
the first
more
time in
about that
over-
in the discussion.
Over 4 years, there's actually both teams are in the same corner, so that'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
I thought it was interesting how they no longer have a centerpiece like
That's
in the
true.
past games that we've
Yeah.
had. In the past games, we had a central structure of some sort that either gave us points such as balls and that kind of stuff. We were supposed to hang from the center structure, but no, they decided to go for the corner pieces now.
And I mean, it is still a main structure, so there is still one main structure that things go around. But it is interesting that it's
There's
no
just
longer
two of
just
them,
one
yeah.
structure; there are two for each side. And I just think before Tony, you get into your views on this, I just think it is kind of interesting that one thing that this does mean is that alliances will have to split up between those
Yeah.
two, because it's not just one red alliance mountain and one blue alliance mountain. They're
Yeah.
mixed.
Plus, it makes it a whole lot more open
Yeah.
field.
Yeah.
Like before, we had to circle around this center structure, and now it's just open.
Retweet.
But the problem that it's all focused on that mountain. There's not a whole lot you can do on the floor.
You can only
mean,
really
there-
pick up balls.
There are blocks on the floor that will block us, which isn't too much of a deal.
You just have to make sure they don't clog
Yeah,
you up.
that's
So, Tony, what are your ideas? And we'll get into more discussion about the actual specifics of the game.
what do you mean my ideas?
Well, your opinion, what your first reaction was when you saw this game.
Oh, when I saw the game, I was a bit scared because I saw the mountain and I was like, well, programming is going to be hard this year because we have a new language that we have to learn. But with the new language, it's really interesting because we can see, or it allows us to use, it gives us a better opportunity to use the language because we have more abilities with our sensors, and yeah.
Yeah, it's true. They have opened up.
And
that.
you said you were a little bit scared when you first saw the video. We have a really great video on our YouTube page that basically is a video of the audience watching the kickoff video, and there's a very nice kind of audience-wide gasp as they see the Rams for the first time.
As soon as that title screen opened up and you see rescue, and then you look down and see the field, and the two corners there's these mountains, and it's just like an overflow of
Ominous
what are we
feeling.
gonna do?
I think one of the significant points that was brought up there was that we don't have one central structure. We have two, basically. And I wonder whether one of the motivations behind that was to decrease the amount of interaction that happened between robots. I wonder if that may have been a problem in previous years. The robots were getting too close, too much kind of pinning, interference. And we know the scoring record for Cascade Effect last year was because of penalty points from a robot failing and then sitting underneath the where balls rolled out.
Discussion time.
Yeah.
So I think that since we're switching from using the Samantha modules to the phones, I'm kind of wondering what it'll be like if there'll be connection issues, just like there was with the Samantha,
really,
or if we're looking at a more secure network.
I think that it's going to be more secure because it's no longer there's no longer a go between. It's you and the robot. There's no longer these people sitting right here who have to funnel you to the robot. It's just you and the robot. So I think that at least two variables are less likely to go wrong than three. So.
And that's one of the reasons that first tried to change the system, because there were so many connection problems with the Samantha modules.
That and Lego being a pain. But
That's true.
Yeah.
we won't talk about that here on this podcast.
We don't have any elbow pieces. What?
Alright, so
Another interesting thing, certainly there's a new programming language. I wonder how teams are going to use the additional freedom that comes from that to create new systems for controlling the robots, and how that's going to play into the control award this year.
side note, flamethrowers and C4 are still not allowed.
it's really open in the way that you can deal with sensors and such, because like any industrial sensor that you can get your hands on that's legal by the game handbook you can use. So, and then they're pushing their new sensors out this year. So we're going to see how performance works with those and inside the programming language as well.
Now, one thing I hope with that, and I mean, I play a lot of video games, I'll admit that very freely here, is that one thing people hate about like video games where you can come in and buy these parts from it is that then it might become pay to win, so then these kids that have all this money can get all the nice weaponry and beat out everyone. So one thing I'm worried about with this being so open is, like, what about the big city teams that like have all these sponsors and could go out and get these amazing sensors that do everything they need to, going against these teams who maybe are working just as hard, but they have to go out and do fundraising.
Right. We're gonna have to see the intake or the outtake from FTC and see what they're pushing for in that aspect.
So, and I mean, that's something we're not going to be able to predict until the game started, but that will be something interesting.
Yeah, it's not even sensors. I know Andy Mark released a new motor that has a really high gear ratio.
Of course, there are limitations on those in the FTC.
But I mean, like, you still have to purchase this motor that it's compared to an old motor, it does significantity better things.
But it's also more costly.
The point about affordability, I think, is going to be kind of interesting this year, and how teams might have to, teams that are able to fundraise more are going to maybe have an advantage. But one of the things that might hold that back is that the more complex sensors you have, the more complex programming you also have to have simultaneously.
Just buying it won't get it done for you.
And I wonder whether this year's game is kind of designed to help teams test out the new programming language, because we do have a lot of different things. We can sense the colors on that on the beacon. We can use a line following system to get to the beacon, and then there are also all sorts of mechanical challenges of getting up and down the mountain.
Exactly.
Well, we should probably be moving on to the different parts of the game now. So,
I think what we're going to try to do is just to summarize the way that scoring works in this game, and talk about how each individual action provides points and why those points may or may not be important.
Yeah, as mentioned before, there are a ridiculous amount of ways you can get points this year, both in Autonomous and in Teleop. And starting in Autonomous, you can push the button according to your color. So, however, if you push the wrong button, the other team gets the 20 points.
Yeah.
So that could be a negative.
I don't know. I see a lot of teams on the sideline being like, pushes the wrong button.
There's also that delay of 5 seconds that you have to watch out for.
That's true.
Just to watch out.
But I mean,
for
you also have to be
press
careful not to double press and try and get out of the way for. So that's one thing that I think is kind of interesting, is the teamwork where you have to push the button, but then also your partner has to. So you've got to make sure you can.
And that's one of the ways that the alliance working together is going to continue to be important.
That's like a definite that you're going to need to have at least two separate parts for it, just in case they're like, oh, we have the only program we have is to go up and press that immediately. Then that's where you need to be like, okay, we have one where we wait, like where we do something else for 10 seconds and then move up to that point.
But despite the button pushing, I think that one of the significant things is that the alliances don't really have to work together this year. You have two separate mountains. You can go down, get your stuff, score on your own mountain, go up to the top and hang separately.
Right.
There's not going to be any double hanging like there was in Block Party.
So moving on to the next way of scoring in Autonomous is the little climber guys. You can score those into the backs of the shelter, which, if you score both, that's 20 points, 10 apiece. And also, the balls are all the debris is going to be out there during Autonomous. So watch out when you're programming, because you might have to maneuver around that a little bit.
And I think that might be more of a hardware issue, too, to try to prevent stuff from getting stuck under your robots. I know that was a significant problem for us last year.
This is not something that I noticed the first time either, but if you look at the game enough and look at the scoring elements, you'll realize that those little people that you can score, 20 points in Autonomous, they're also counted in the normal teleop mode. So it's not just every time you score them they're counted. It's at the end of Autonomous, however many people are in your box, they count that as the score. And then at the end of the normal teleop mode, however many people are in your box, they do that as a new score. So if you drop those people in autonomous, you're really getting 40 points, both 20 from autonomous and 20 from teleop.
You can also pick up debris in autonomous and score that while you're then trying to maneuver up the mountain in autonomous.
And it's more difficult to do, but it is still a possibility.
Correct.
And if your Alliance team member gets their 2 guys and you get your 2 guys, that's total combined of 80 points.
That's
so
80 points for just
fish
the
in the bucket.
autonomous people.
Going to be very large this year, as it has been in previous years.
Hopefully you teams will get out there and get a good autonomous, because there have been teams in the past that have no autonomous at all, but...
Yeah, and that's something, we're in Indiana, which is not, we are, in terms of FTC teams, we're a very fast-growing state, but we have a lot of rookie teams, and we have for the past several years, and they always have a lot of trouble with the autonomous programming, so I'm a bit concerned about that, and especially with the new programming language this year, with fewer resources for help, there are going to be a lot of teams, especially in our area in Indiana, that don't have autonomous at all.
That's what we're here to do, help you guys out.
Yep,
Yeah.
4 of the 6 of the members sitting here talking to you are, in fact, programmers. So definitely,
That's right.
if you're listening to this and you have no clue how to program, hit us up. We'll help you
Yeah.
out with that.
And then one thing I found was kind of interesting. It is difficult to do. From a logistics, mechanical standpoint, but you can get a lot of points just from going up the mountain. Like an autonomous, it's. Oh, do you want to read those off, Mitchell?
Yeah, in autonomous, if you just straight up park in the floor goal, which is right next to where you would score in the beacon repair zone, you get 5 points. You can also just stay parked in the beacon repair zone, although that might cause some issues with your partner if they're trying to score their climbers. You can also just park on the tile floor portion of the mountain. As long as you're partially on the mountain, you'll also grab 5 points in autonomous. And as you climb up the mountain, your points will increase. So when you're fully on the mountain, you'll get 10 points. And when you're on the mid zone, which is past the bottommost churro, you'll get 20 points. And once you're on the high zone, which I think is after the
it's
little
the
bend,
45
After
degree
you get
angle.
past that second bend, once you're completely only on the churros, there's no ramp under you.
So I think you have to get over a total of 3 or 4 churros to get to the 40-point gain in autonomous there.
Which is
Yeah, there are
kind of
3 of them,
crazy,
I think.
but it is kind of, because that's going to be difficult to
Yeah.
do, it's just a reward for being able to do it. So, and that's one thing for teams that are worried about, I'm not sure how we're going to get to, the color sensors or, be able to line up with the buttons. If your robot can get up the churros, just go straight up the ramp during autonomous and you'll get 40 points. So that's something for teams that maybe if you're running out of time, or even though I would encourage you to save time for programming, there's always the possibility of just going up the ramp to get points. So I thought that was kind of a nice thing to...
Even if you're new to coding, that's probably the easiest way for you guys to get good points during autonomous is to just build a program that just solely goes up a ramp.
Yeah, that's mostly a hardware challenge, even during autonomous. A lot more of a hardware challenge than a software challenge.
Right.
Watch your center of mass, or you might be tipping over.
Yeah, that would kind of suck.
Yeah, especially with about $600 of electronics plus a $150 phone.
Not
and then-
something you want to crush.
Yeah.
Alright, so...
Another way you can score in autonomous would be to pick up the debris that is going to be everywhere, all over the floor. However, that might be a challenge because you can only pick up 5 pieces, and I'm not sure if
And
they'll dock you if you get 6 there.
And they're also, it's unreliable because they dump them on this, so it's spread out completely randomly, so you wouldn't be able to visually...
You'd just be picking them up blind at that point.
Yeah.
Right, but they're relatively grouped around the base of the
Or at least the
mountains.
blocks
Or at least the blocks are, but the balls have a lot more freedom to where they go. So if there is a little bit of a pattern or correlation with where they always land.
Alright, so, speaking of debris, how are we going to score that in teleop? How's the scoring look, at least?
Yeah, so in teleop, obviously if you do score debris in autonomous, it doesn't count for your autonomous score, but it will carry over to your teleop score. And how you would do that is if you score in the floor goal, which is right underneath of the beacon repair zone, you'd get 1 point for each piece of debris. Now keep in
Well,
mind you
it's-
can only be in contact, or I mean not in contact, but like in possession of
Affected.
5 pieces of debris.
Yeah.
So whether
And
that
that's
be
similar to previous years.
So yeah, but you just got to be careful of that new teams because they will catch you if you're pushing like 10 balls into the floor zone, they will catch you for that, and that
Yeah.
can be some serious
I
penalties.
think it's a minor penalty for every 5 seconds you have more than one
Yeah.
piece of debris or something like that. Another way you can score is the low zone goal. So there's 3 baskets on your way up the mountain, and the first one, if you score in that one, it's 5 points per debris. Now keep in mind the blocks are 2 centimeters cubed. However,
Inches.
oh yeah, 2 inches.
Tiny block.
That would be
Yeah.
awesome. 2 centimeters.
We can just have a vacuum.
But you can only have 5 of them, remember.
Only 5.
Only 5.
2 inches cubed. So they're a little bit smaller than just the actual sphere wiffle balls, and they actually stack better inside of the bin. So
Yeah, it's
keep
true.
that in mind.
The boxes almost seem designed to hold those.
Yeah.
So.
One thing we did run into when we were testing right after the kickoff was that the balls, especially on the highest basket, once you get a couple blocks and some balls in there, they're just going to roll out.
And one thing is that if you get any game pieces outside of the actual foam area or the mountains, that's a penalty.
And I wonder also about how if balls just roll out of those, whether that counts as de-scoring, because then that's another penalty. That's something we'll have to look
So
into.
that's something to. So scoring these because what would the middle and high scoring?
10 and 15 is per.
So I mean that can give you some serious points, but you've got to be careful when scoring these. So then the zipline climbers. Those are how much, Mitchell?
No, those are 20 points apiece. And there's 3 on the left side of the ramp, whether you're in red or blue alliance. And so yeah, there's 3 of those, which you can knock out and get a total of 60 points. However, once you hit the first one, one climber will fall down the zip line, as implied. But yeah, once you hit the second lever, you actually have to go back and hit the first lever because of just how the mechanism works.
Yeah, it's an interesting style. So basically, you have 3 flips, and those 3 flips translate to the 3 flips for clips. The 3 clips at the top.
Yeah.
But because of the way it's set up, in order for you to get all 3 of the climbers, you have to hit lowest, middle, high, and then go back down and hit the middle and the lowest again in order to release them. So you can't just say okay, I'll take one trip up, hit all the sides, and get all the climbers. You've got to be able to go back down and hit those again in order to really release all of the climbers.
And that's something that we'll have to think about clarifications for, is how those are going to be scored, because I talked about in the video about how actually hitting the things also counts. So I wonder if it has to be both. You have to get the climbers down and hit the things, or maybe if the climbers get stuck up there somehow, the rubber band fails or something like
Then
that
you'll
happens.
still get some.
The scoring
That's
that might be a
interesting.
challenge this year.
And then, so then obviously you can puck on the ramp again for some points. But then what I kind of thought was interesting is how small endgame is this year. I mean, there are only 2 scoring, right, Mitchell? What are those 2?
Oh, well, actually, I mean, there's several ways to score in independent categories. So there's technically, I guess, 2 ways to score. You can either be parked on the ramp in some fashion, so whether you're the low, medium, or high zone, or you could actually hang, which is 80 points. That's a pretty hefty amount.
And if you did that during Block Party, I mean, we are thinking about using a pretty similar mechanism we did to just for the hanging itself that we did in Block Party. That's
So if you're
kind of
not
how we were
sure of
talking
how to
about this
hang,
is
try and look up
Cascade
some
Party
videos.
this year.
But and then there's also the all clear sign, right?
Yeah, that's up there for 20 points as well if you tap that down. So your alliance color is facing vertically.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, once a team hits the old clear sign, another team cannot change the old clear sign. Once it's hit, it's final.
That's right. There's
Yeah.
no fighting over it, so you can't have
and
little boxing people.
I
up
think
there
that's
trying to
one of the things that's going to be interesting this year. That kind of creates a race to the top of the mountain to
one
pull
thing
that
though,
thing
you're
down
not
first.
allowed to touch either the all clear zone or the hanging ball until. So one thing I imagine is some mobiles getting up there and hanging and having their arms barely right over the bar,
hanging bar.
and then as soon as the end game happens, click to come down.
I don't know. Yeah, that's true. Another thing that I kind of wonder about at first day kickoff is how far that needs to go. And like whether you just have to touch it a tiny bit, whether it has to be actually parallel or vertical, I guess, if it's your Alliance Colors PVC pipe there.
And based off the rules, we do believe that it has to be almost parallel, if not
Yeah.
completely parallel. So you can't just simply hit it and it be leaning a little towards your side and that be counted. You have to actually knock that down as far as you can get it.
That's a question to ask in the drivers' meeting, I think, at every competition.
All right.
Well, that was our podcast for today. Thanks for listening to Spare Parts with Team FTC Team 535 Tobor in Crawford, Indiana. You can find more information about us. Our email address is 535tobor, Tobor, @gmail.com. So email us. We're also working on setting up websites, or a website, I guess, and other digital media and social media to connect with teams that either need help, have inputs, anything like that.
All right. Thank you for listening to Tobor 535.